All right, today we're talking about the 1995 hit film Waterworld, starring Kevin or Costner.
Kevin or Costner.
And nobody else. No, Kevin-er.
Kevin-er?
Like Kevin with an ER at the end, yeah. He's not just Kevin, he's Kevin-er.
Kevin-er, Costner-er?
He's the Kevinist.
The Gills upgraded him.
Kevin Costnerist?
Kevin Kirchhoffner-Koffs, starring Kevin Costner.
Welcome back to I'll See Myself Out. My name's Dan Lisho.
I'm Ryan Patel.
I'm Norm Reynolds.
And I'm Terry.
Consider these your only warnings.
There will be foul language.
There will be spoilers.
And there will be foul language.
Fuck.
Excuse me.
All right, well, I guess thank you for joining us today. This time on the podcast, we're talking about the 1995 movie Waterworld. Norm, what the fuck are you laughing at?
Thank you for joining us. Nobody's here by choice.
I got one of Dan's jokes.
You want to do another two-parter?
What's your joke, Terry?
And who are you directing it at?
Oh, it's directing straight at Norm. It's going right down Norm's alley.
Go on.
Don't clench, Norm.
Oh no, he's gonna have to work for it.
Oh.
Full clench.
Norm,
Yes, Terry.
what did the ocean say to the shore?
I don't know, Terry, what?
Well, Norm, you'll have to wait to the end of the podcast.
I'll fucking kill you.
Please do.
Okay, so today we're talking about Waterworld, starring Kevin Costner. And, oh my god, why am I fucking blanking on this?
Dennis Quaid, by the way.
How dare you?
Jack Black.
Yeah, I'm going to toss Jack Black's name in there just to fuck everybody up. So today we're watching Waterworld, starring Kevin Costner, Dennis Hopper, and surprisingly, Jack Black.
What? Did you say Jack Black's in this movie?
Yeah, Jack Black's in this movie.
Jack Black is in this movie. He doesn't necessarily have a starring role. I mean, he does have a starring role, but if you're a fucking snob, I guess he doesn't.
I mean, if you want to consider the person who nearly killed Kevin Costner in this movie a starring role, then yes. Yes, he did.
I guess he did come the closest to killing Kevin Costner.
Yeah, until the lady on the boat decided to shoot him with a harpoon gun.
And right now, we're going to talk about spoilers. If at this point you have not watched Waterworld in the more than 20 years since Waterworld has been released, and you have not watched Waterworld, there's now going to be spoilers for Waterworld. So now's the time to go watch it, because we're going to get into it now.
I want to hear Terry's Google search results.
This is what I found. With the ice caps melted and the world's flooded, a rough around the edges but benevolent oil tanker captain goes to impossible lengths to find a fabled map that proves dry land still exists and protects his crew from a mutated ichthyosapien that is hell-bent on hiding the truth at any cost. I don't know about you, but that oil tanker captain does sound like a good old hero. But I think it might be a little off. I don't know.
If that's what the story was supposed to be, I don't think the person playing the captain read the script, or at least not the synopsis.
The synopsis that I read was Marlboro gets a large Hollywood budget for a commercial.
That's more likely.
What about Spam? Wasn't the canned meat place there as well? Those big old used cans meat?
I mean, compared to the cigarettes in this movie, just even that one scene where he's like, "Want to smoke? Never too early to start."
I'll slide that under my hat and we'll bring it up a little later. But first, Dan, what did you like about this movie?
I'm a big fan of anything that has to do with mutants. The idea of that biology can go in such unique ways and in some instances give you a superpower. It's pretty cool. I like the concept. So, that was enough to keep me engaged in this movie. But I liked how tight in the chest the movie made me. Just the idea of not being near land forever.
Right, because you sing.
Yeah. So I can swim.
Dan has zero natural buoyancy.
My natural buoyancy depth is about 2 feet under the water. I'll sink about 2 feet, and then that's where I stop sinking. But I get there very quickly.
I'm like human styrofoam. I just float on the top. I don't think my ass even hits the water. It just kind of just there.
Your entire body's hydrophobic, and you just levitate above the water by a couple inches.
So I was a little tight in the chest about that, but I liked that. I like that when a movie gives you kind of an emotional reaction to something, or even a physical one. The concept of the movie was really cool. I just thought it was a cool story.
Norm, what about you, buddy?
My favorite thing about this movie was the practical effects, specifically Kevin Costner's ship. and how it was basically a Rube Goldberg invention. You like tap a little lever and then 700 other things go off and all of a sudden you're sailing. It was enjoyable to watch.
I agree with you completely. I love the fact that the practical effects on that movie, but I love the fact that they're out. It looked like they were out in the real ocean, which I'm assuming they filmed completely open water and were sailing, which is kind of I would say a hefty price to do so, as well as insurance for guys like Kevin Costner. I could only imagine how much money they had to pay in insurance to keep that guy from not dying.
Well, I mean, he could breathe underwater, so it wasn't that big a deal.
Fair, that is point. He can also go to 800 feet under the water and not get crushed, but that's beside the point. Also, what I liked about it was at the end, when he doesn't stay and he leaves. I love that part of the movie, only for the fact that if he is that much of the water and just doesn't really give a shit about anywhere else because he can live underwater all he wants, he wouldn't stay on land. He just doesn't care.
Would you say he's a fish out of water?
He was fish in water.
See yourself out.
Ryan, what was your favorite part?
The more I think about it, I think my favorite part of the movie was honestly the acting. Because at moments it was really bad, but then at other moments it was so bad that it was good. I don't know exactly what the timeline of the movie is because it doesn't seem extremely clear when they explain it in the film, but enough time has passed that somehow there's just a lot of very American seeming characters, a lot of obscurely and like suspiciously clean shaven people as well. For people who don't have razors and live at sea, and a lot of lines that were just like really weird, and a lot of performances that seemed like really out of place, which I guess all came together to make the whole movie feel out of place. It was ridiculous all around, and I think Dennis Hopper almost made this entire movie for me.
Most people shave because it looks good, and in a post-apocalyptic world, I don't think that they're like, did you see the state of those people? They don't give a shit what they look like, and shaving off their beard is not really like a maintenance thing.
Maybe it was evolutionary. Let's dive into what we didn't like about the movie. I feel like Ryan should go first.
Why would you suggest that? Let me go back to talk about how so many of the characters, especially the villains in this movie, were somehow clean shaven. That's where it all started for me when I thought, okay, this is kind of like, I mean, I'm a stickler for like, I guess, really nerdy stuff. I like things to at least have a little bit of sense applied to them, or to at least be brought into the movie a little bit more through the details. And the more I kept on seeing how ridiculous the characters and stuff were looking, you had all these great costumes and these great sets, but they had all these people who looked like they were really hastily thrown into frames. So yeah, I mean, I guess some of the characters, took me out of the movie a little bit. Like the way Dennis Hopper looked. Dennis Hopper was completely clean shaven, and he had a rather orange spray tan, which was kind of surprising.
But didn't you love his eye patch? His eye patch was awesome. The goggles?
I much preferred his fake eye.
The fake eye later on through the film that's like hand painted, and there's these gross fucking eyelashes glued around it. I appreciated a lot about the practical effects of it. I appreciated a lot of like the way that some of the scenes were showing like all these interesting stunts, but then you would think that there'd be cutoffs during the filming to try to hide the mistakes or to hide some of the screw ups or like B-roll, that they just kept all of the footage of the stunts in because they probably thought it was all too expensive for us to throw this footage away.
Yeah.
So there'd be like people like falling off of jet skis, and there'd be people like running around in circles, not doing anything in the background of the scene because they're background actors and stuff. Just like weird, funny things that didn't really ruin the movie, but definitely were things that kind of took you out of it. And if you were trying to take it seriously, I guess. It is definitely interesting that like, and especially what a coincidence if they're really telling this from the perspective of this particular story in Waterworld, in the Waterworld cinematic universe, that the two main characters just happen to be more or less slightly rednecks. I mean, what are the odds? You would think that those accents probably wouldn't survive. If anything, they'd be like the least to survive based on everything flooding and based on population numbers of how many people in the world speak certain kinds of languages.
You can't sail on a gun, right?
Well, my first bone to pick on this whole thing, it has to do with the fact that the world got flooded by all the ice melting, right? So I just sat down and did some research on this because really I'm like, okay, that's fucking terrifying because the world is like warming up like a motherfucker.
Well, yeah, wouldn't you want to do some research on it? Because like you would imagine if they were going to create like a science fiction theory and build a movie around it, that they would have some idea of like just how much flooding would happen in like
exactly.
in a modeling scenario.
Yeah, and for me, I really don't want to be in the middle of this. So I sat down and looked at it, and they're saying it would likely only go up about 200 to 250 feet. Now, unless the entire world is only 200 feet above sea level, we're not going to get 800 feet of water above sea level.
That's why dry land was in the Himalayas, man.
Montreal is like 400 feet above sea level.
Okay, so maybe they landed in Montreal. Sorry to interrupt it. It's conceivable that their area of sailing is not as big as they think it is, and any of these dry land portions could be the thing they're looking for, but there's not a lot of mountain ranges.
Like, I'm pretty sure most of the coastal region would be above sea level.
Now you're taking it too far.
And also, are you suggesting that there's multiple dry lands, plural?
I think there's many dry lands. I think these people just got caught in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and now they're fucked. I think this is a bunch of crazy people who went out. So they were probably on in Louisiana, and they tried to get away from Louisiana, and they, instead of going left, they went right, and they got fucking stuck out there on some sort of vessel. Then over the years, they're now in the middle of the ocean, forgotten about everything else, and have just evolved into this like hillbilly on a flotilla, created their own society in the middle of the ocean, and now it's taken them 12 days to sail, and they just always sail in circles. They don't have one of those sextant thingies and knowing where they're going. They just get lost.
Are you suggesting that this could end like an M. Night Shyamalan movie where at the end, Kevin Costner goes sailing off and finds like a cruise ship and it's actually only been like 20 years?
It is a wet village. It's a village full of water. This is all it is. It's the village just on water. This is my theory.
And instead of actual flooding, it's just like everything's fine?
They just took the wrong turn. Have you ever not gotten on the highway, drive somewhere, missed your exit completely, just kept driving and
then stop thinking the world existed?
Wow. So now I'm gonna pull this train back on the rails a little bit, because I'm gonna go back to my secondary bone to pick. Is he takes the lady on the boat with him, and he wants to show her his secret, his little special zone underwater.
You made that sound really sexy, Terry. I think you're making it sound a lot sexier than it really is.
Ryan, I have to make this sound interesting because the movie is 3 hours of sadness and pain. Anyway, they puts a bucket on her head, or a big giant bubble that he magically has on the boat that is there, and they swim 700 to 800 feet down below to see the land. I don't, again, not a water doctor, don't know, but I'm pretty sure that 800 feet below sea level is going to have a lot of pressure. I don't think a little bucket of air that is just a piece of plastic is going to protect her legs from getting squishied. He might have iron lungs and, a body made of steel.
I really wish that Kevin Costner in this movie was more fish than man. That would sell it a lot more for me. Not like a merman, but like a lot more fish than man. Like a fish with like an arm instead of a man with gills.
I'm even going to turn this one back a little bit. But I do appreciate that he didn't have the fish, because if he was a little more fishy, then I lost my thought in a thought.
You didn't have a thought.
I'm sorry.
He was fishier. If he was more a fish.
If he was more a fish, he'd be less believable.
Can you fucking imagine though? He rolls up in his ship, mostly fish with some arms.
Yeah.
Asking if he can come in. How do you think the movie would have progressed? They would have been like, holy shit, food's coming to us.
Like a 400-pound salmon with like one really jacked arm and a mullet.
Oh, fuck. So here's my problem.
Okay.
And I think like it's probably like it's a small detail, I think, on the grand scheme of things, but it has a major plot implication. They were firing guns, like actual bullets.
Yes.
And I can probably make peace with them having found a massive stockpile of ammunition that they're using. However, they went out of their way to show that they're collecting the shells, to imply that they're reusing them. And I don't understand how, because they barely had their lives together, yet alone having a press to make a new bullet and then shove it into a bullet casing like with gunpowder. I don't want that.
A minor point that kind of pissed me off is he pissed inside of that coffee filter, turned a crank, and then got some water out of it. Now, I don't know what kind of filtration system he's using, but I feel like you could probably put salt water in there. So anybody want to unpack? Anybody have any comments on that? Using the filter to filter out salt water? What do you guys think of that?
To desalinate water can't be that easy. You have to typically boil it off and then recollect the steam. Usually the only way to desalinate water, by cooking it off.
You would get like 2 uses out of the coffee maker max, though.
But I'd like to add on to this point right now. So any like television show or movie where I've ever seen where there's like extensive seafaring or people who've been like lost at sea or stranded at sea has been involved, that usually like the saving grace of not being able to have fresh drinking water is from there being some element of rain at some point, whether it's like a passing rainstorm or something like that. We never see fucking rain at all during this movie. It is like bright, sunny Florida the entire movie, right? Like, can you imagine how easy it would be for people on like that flotilla island to all just go down and fucking sink if one tropical hurricane came through? They'd be fucked right away. Everything would be fucking gone. So, like, I just realized this thinking about it now. It doesn't rain at all. And you think it would rain a fucking ton because there's nothing but water evaporating all the time. So it makes you wonder if they would have rainwater to drink if that was part of it. And they'd probably have a fucking lot of it. Like, you don't have to be a genius to think, okay, I've got a big, giant, rusty vat. I'm going to trap some water in here so that me and the rest of the guys don't have to drink each other's piss and blood for the next month, right?
So I did some research because I kind of had a similar thought to you, Ryan, and I did some research on this, and I found on IMDb. Now, I bet you the reason why they have no film footage on any rain is because Kevin Costner nearly died when he got caught into a small squall while tied to the mast of his trimaran. The ship was rocking so dangerously, and the crew had to navigate into calmer waters before they could attempt to get Costner safely down from the mast. So I think they would have had one time that fucking thing happened. Do you think they're ever going to go out in water and rain and say, no, they're just going to say, fuck it, let's just do it when it's sunny?
Something to add, by the way, is that if we're talking about trying to protect Kevin Costner, especially just as a film just as a liability that you don't want to have to worry about killing, who was probably arguably at that time one of the biggest A-list actors in Hollywood. If we're worried about him drowning at any point, you'd figure later in the movie they're also going to try not to blow him up. But they came pretty fucking close, because if you're watching this movie and you get down to the scene where Dennis Hopper is trying to escape the oil tanker on the plane, and then Kevin Costner's character fires a harpoon into the plane and then zip lines down the center of the exploding oil tanker. If you watch that scene repeatedly, like if you go back and watch it a couple times, you can see that as Kevin Costner's ziplining, he's fucking just crying and praying for death because there's so many pyrotechnics going off around his face. He probably can't even open his eyes without them melting. I'm not exaggerating. They probably almost killed him with that alone. There's like, you figure if the action star who's probably used to doing stunts is going down a zip line and he looks like he's in pain, you're probably doing it wrong, right? Or your insurance is incredible, one or the other. But I don't know if that adds up. At least their logic didn't at the time. But anyway, it just seems unusual that they didn't put a little bit of energy into, like, I don't know, trying to even just making some B-list footage of rain happening in like a montage.
They're going through realism, Ryan. They wanted to have real gills, real water, real people. No rain.
They should have renamed this Florida World instead of Waterworld, because it would make a lot more sense.
We need to make a new movie, Ryan. Florida World, and just big fucking water gators who want to come up there and eat the people.
Guys, this movie's been done, okay? You guys are talking about Lake Placid right now.
Oh, fucking Jesus.
So this leads me to my next point, which is I have 2 points left. And one of them is I think his gills are too small.
Holy shit.
Are you gill shaming right now, you motherfucker?
Yeah, definitely gill shaming. His gills are far too small to be able to carry enough oxygen throughout his body. Like, if you look at a fish, their gills are like 1/5 the size of their body. They're very
But how
big.
do you know his gills didn't, there weren't other gills in his armpits or something?
That's fair enough.
His butt cheeks.
You're making assumptions, Dan.
Sorry. The gills behind his ears, as standalone gills, are not big enough to carry oxygen to his whole body. So that leads me to believe that there must have been more gills.
Do you know what would have fixed that whole problem, the whole argument you have with him having gills that are too small? Would be if, when they had done it at the time, they gave Costner a big dirty blowhole on his forehead.
That's a different movie, Ryan.
Like a puckering asshole on his forehead, just constantly sucking in and out.
That would imply that he couldn't breathe underwater, though.
Well, no, he could breathe underwater. He would just have to come up for air. He could just hold it for a long
So
time.
that's not breathing underwater. That's holding your breath.
Did you hear the whole thing that you just said?
Okay, not breathing underwater, but it would make him aquatic. How do you think fucking dolphins get around, bro?
They breathe air.
Bro? Fuck, we just went off the rails. He just dropped bro.
Dolphins get around.
Fucking bro. Some bro hole?
Listen, I just want some blowhole action happening in this movie.
Okay, Ryan, we'll make you the porn, Kevin Costner and the glory blowhole.
Not everything can be a bukkake film, Ryan.
So let's press past the gills, because that went somewhere. This leads me to my final and biggest issue that I had with this movie in terms of the plot. Kevin Costner leaves land, presumably to venture far out into sea yet again. And I guess he blames it on just being uncomfortable on land. And he said it doesn't feel right because it doesn't move like water moves. That's fair enough, but he still requires fresh water. And have you ever seen like a rich fucking person with a yacht just off the coast? Like he could probably just like go out a little bit, drop anchor, and just hang out and like come in whenever he needs fresh water. It just didn't make sense that he had to like get supplies to go right back out into like deep sea territory.
Yeah, they could have fixed that. They could have fixed that really easily by like changing that idea to, instead of him being like, okay, like I belong at sea and I'm just gonna arbitrarily decide that I don't want to be around the only other human beings that I now know to be alive. It would have made more sense if like they turned it into like a spin-off opportunity or a sequel opportunity where he said something along the lines of like, I'm gonna go find the others and I'll be back. You know what I mean? So at least like that way there's a mission and a purpose to him doing that. But yeah, I agree.
I don't know about you, but have you ever been on a boat and then get off the boat, go on the land? You fucking want to puke your guts out after you've gotten used to the water. I have something to add to that whole point, but kind of a moral question. So you said that he was going to go out and that could be going out to find all the people that were trying to kill him and hated him, etc. You've only got a finite amount of land. Would you go out and try to find all the people you could to fill up that land, or just say fuck them and enjoy the land?
Did you see how big that island was that they found?
Oh yeah,
like that was not an island. That was like a fucking subcontinent.
Well, keeping it to yourself is also not good, because that was the whole point that the child was sent out with a map, because the people that were there didn't have enough people to fuck with, so they ended up dying out. They had no one to procreate with, which meant there was no biodiversity. So there's a need to go out and get at least a number of people,
okay,
to kind of like establish a colony,
which is literally the only scientific point in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's like in theory, the story behind the film is an interesting story, but it would have been more interesting if they'd given it like a little bit more context rather than here's an idea that we're not going to explain in any detail and you need to accept it. And we're also going to spend probably the most money that's ever been spent on a movie making this come to life. Clearly not too many great business people behind this film, but I guess they've learned a lot since then. So, all right. So obviously there's a lot of weird stuff, some inconsistencies and some really strange production choices. But why don't we take a moment now to talk about what we would do to make this movie better? The list might be pretty long, but we're probably all have different opinions about what would be the most important thing to make this movie better. So let's do that.
I'm going to start with my theory of this movie. Yeah, I kind of want more of backstory of what the hell these characters were. Like, where did that girl come from? Where did the smokers come from? Where did it, like, just any sort of backstory of what these characters were beyond, yep, world warmed up, water came up. I just need to know a little bit more. It's missing all its points and it's just kind of there. Yeah, I just want more backstory.
But at the risk of sounding like I missed a lot of details, were there any women on that smoker barge? Were they all just dudes eating Spam and smoking cigarettes? Because that might raise a lot of other questions about how there's still so many of them.
There must have been. They just didn't show them.
I don't recall seeing any.
If I'm going to hypothesize that there is a bit of a bro culture on that luxury yacht, I think that there's a possibility that any non-males were probably confined in one way or another. I just feel like they didn't seem like the kind of people who would appreciate women having an opinion.
I think you're close to correct. I mean, we can't prove it with actual footage or director commentary for that matter, but I think you're correct.
Honestly, even talking about this movie makes me want to have a smoke.
How would you make this movie better, Norm?
I think I would give it a different plot. Sorry, I realize how that sounded.
Land world.
But I think what I meant was
shoot the whole thing on land.
Norm was just writhing around like the guy in the office who you are sure is going to reach into the desk and pull an Uzi out.
I would have added some rain. I think that would have been a good start. And apart from that, I would have liked to have known how Enola got off Mount Everest. Yeah, apart from those two things, I think I like the movie. I think they did a great job kind of dropping hints that Enola was actually from land. You know, the fact that she couldn't swim and She was, you know, and she was drawing all of these things that were like land-based animals or trees and shit like that. Like there was a lot of cool little like foreshadowing that was going on. And I'm always a fan of having the whole story. Like I like having as much information about something as possible, unless it's very specifically omitted to create mystery, but not when it's omitted to kind of make the plot seem more cohesive. And this movie would have been a really good series. And I think if they wanted to fire it up, it would be, you know, a huge undertaking to do an entire series on water. But with the advancement of like all the stuff that we're seeing with the Mandalorian and how they can shoot things inside of a room and make it look like it's basically anywhere, relaunching Waterworld and having a more in-depth story to tell would be really cool. And that can kind of open up. There's a lot of other stories in here that could get told as well, like how Kevin Costner got to be the age that he was. There's a whole life there that we haven't heard about, and he's clearly had to hide the fact that he is a mutant for, I don't know how old he is, like 40 years.
I actually agree with like everything that everybody else said. I didn't have any point to disagree with, and honestly, I think you all kind of said everything that I would want to say. And I think touching on what Dan just pointed at, where the idea of Waterworld being a series, as ridiculous as that sounds, if you use this movie as an example, it would actually do great as a series, I think. And I specifically like the idea that Dan pointed out, that there's so many stories that could come out of something that is so broad in scope, as a theme and as a setting and as like a genre for something that's this unique. There's a lot of questions that weren't answered, and there's a lot that you could build on. And a great example of something that was a film and then was remade into a series that has only a certain amount of set pieces, has recurring cast, has multiple storylines working in it, and so many opportunities to explore those storylines, is Snowpiercer. Snowpiercer got made into the Netflix series, and there's nothing wrong with the film. I love the film, but the series itself just gave so much more opportunity to expand on the world as you know it in that story, to provide so much more backstory, to create so much more depth of character with a broader, more intricate cast. And I agree with pretty much everything that was said. Movie series so much would make, the one thing that would have made this movie so much better, that if modernized would make it a great series, would be to do away with so much of the practical effects. Have some of the practical effects, but knowing what's possible now when you watch either high budget films and even honestly low budget films and TV series, when you see so many shows that are historically based with like really incredible shots and really incredible worlds they've created, you could do away with having to worry about the logistics of being in the middle of the ocean and having the most expensive pieces of set probably ever designed, because they were all done by hand and they were probably only used for 20 minutes of filming at most. That would really change the budget when you think about the amount of money that's been poured into something that honestly came out the way that it did, which from the tone I sense that everybody else is sharing, which is not super impressive. That same amount of money applied to a movie today or a series today would be a wild amount of production put into something now. It would be something like, I'm sorry, what was the budget, just to touch back on what we said before? Was the budget like 175 million?
175 million.
Yeah. So $175 million as a budget for something that's only 3 hours long should get you something that is like probably the best cinematic experience known to man. And unfortunately they got, they gave it the old college try, and I think that's what we got. But that would be my one argument, would be more CGI, less practical effects, and to do what you guys mentioned, which is to give some character backstory, maybe apply a little bit more science to the concept of the show, or the movie rather.
So for context, Jurassic Park, which used a lot of practical effects as well, came in at $63 million.
That's almost literally, imagine 3 Jurassic Parks and microwaving them together, and that's the movie you get.
Yeah, so the thing that I would change about the movie to make it better is the villains in the movie. I would want them to be more cunning. I would want them to be using their resources in a wiser way. Like when they had the jet skis hiding underwater, all the rope that they wasted. Like think about where you're gonna find rope or how you're gonna make rope at all, and just the pure waste that somehow one of like the largest groups of people that we see in the movie is so wasteful and survives. That was a hard point for me.
You mean you didn't think the puppet people was like cunning?
I thought that was fucking hilarious. So my point here is they could have definitely reused all of the rope they used to set that up. However, all the jet skis that were like hiding underwater, and for fucking how long? Because these people, these humans that were underwater for that long, probably didn't have fucking gills either.
Oh, they did have they had tubes they were breathing out of. You could see them floating.
Okay.
They had snorkels.
Fine, I can accept that then. But I can't accept how much rope they had to waste for that. Plus, what were they using that was heavy enough to weigh them down, but not heavy enough to sink them all the way?
Well, to pull things back to what Ryan said about using more CGI and the technology that's available today, I think is it James Cameron that did Avatar? We know that when Avatar came out, there was huge advancements that him and his team made. Apparently he's doing it all over again for Avatar 2, and he's taking it, I guess, a lot of the story underwater. So they're inventing new technology or innovating old technology to be better at I think motion capture underwater, and so they're building all new rigs, and basically they're pushing the world of underwater filming ahead by an unforeseeable amount of years. And maybe they're paving the way for a Waterworld series, or even just a Waterworld movie remake.
If there's anybody who could pitch remaking this movie to a studio, it would be James Cameron.
Yeah. Oh, he'd kill it too. He'd knock that out of the park.
There's probably not too many other people who could do that. And at this point, I mean, besides having experience as like a producer, if you've worked with like a lot of CGI type environments, like there's only maybe a handful of other people who would probably be the best options for making something that it has a sci-fi setting and a sci-fi theme with a ton of production being CGI, and then also having some practicals, like maybe like J.J. Abrams or Peter Jackson, or
Christopher Nolan.
Chris Nolan's also a great one. But I think it's got potential, and it's obviously like it's a known story. And I think, being people who saw this when we were younger and we're now seeing it when we're older, it's like when you're younger and you see something and you're a fan of it, you want to defend it because it has that nostalgic value. But when you get older, sometimes when you watch movies that you used to be in love with, you realize that they maybe weren't as good as you remember them. And you start becoming a little bit more open-minded to the idea of even what might be considered classic movies being remade. But you want them to be remade in such a way that they're not a satirical like reiteration of something that you watched before that has nostalgic value, like the way that they remade Point Break. And like Point Break is such like a ridiculous classic movie, and then they remade it to try to make it cool and try to make it serious, and it just like it bombed super hard.
Didn't have Gary Busey.
Yeah, well, that's just the problem with so many movies, is they don't have enough Gary Busey. But but I'd say the problem there is like they didn't keep in line with the spirit of what the original movie was trying to capture. And I think like having Kevin Costner alive still with the option to remake this movie would be like a great way to even do a sequel or to do a remake with a cameo and kind of give like a bit of a nod to something like that. So anyway, those are my thoughts on remaking
This
it.
is a bit off topic, but it's a little secret of mine. I want Christopher Nolan to redo everything. I want Christopher Nolan to take on an irredeemable movie and turn it into like as a challenge. I want someone to give him a budget and say, "Hey, make this good." Can you guys think of a movie that is so irredeemable that you would love to see Christopher Nolan redo?
Yeah, right now, Biodome.
I was thinking the exact same thing, but with Wes Anderson. I would watch any adaptation that he came up with.
Imagine how goofy a Wes Anderson version of Face Off would be.
Fucking
Oh my
whimsical.
God, that's a good one. Well done. Terry, what do you think?
Irredeemably bad.
Battlefield Earth.
I would have to say Snowpiercer.
What? You didn't like Snowpiercer?
I despised that thing.
That's the worst movie you've ever seen.
Yeah, go back and sit through that trash garbage can fire of a movie, and you'll.
Wouldn't it be crazy if after this podcast, Marvel and Disney announced that they were remaking Waterworld and that it was part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Norm already looks upset. Just for the record, for the audience, Norm already looks mad about it.
I don't feel good about it.
Who would you recast to play the lead role for Kevin Costner in this movie if they were to remake it?
I would recast Matthew McConaughey because he reminds me of Kevin Costner.
I think if I were to recast Kevin Costner, it would be with somebody that doesn't talk a lot.
Like a strong silent type. Okay.
That's a great point.
He didn't have a lot of speaking roles in this, and I think McConaughey talks a lot. Although he can act, he can say whatever lines aren't, he can stick to the script, I'm sure. But
Can I make a suggestion? I think if we're going off of your line of thinking, Dan, if we think about an actor who's been in a bunch of films that's played either like a lot of cool and suave and like almost to a degree like non-speaking roles, maybe Ryan Gosling would be a good substitute for Kevin Costner in this movie.
yes, definitely. Clint Eastwood would be my chosen actor to replace Kevin Costner.
I mean, he would be great for like a sequel.
Maybe he could be like the old man that's the flying thing guy.
Except the guy who's flying the helicopter in this movie is really chipper and like really innocent. I'm imagining Clint Eastwood riding like a blimp through the sky, just telling everybody to fuck off down below because he's so old and crass.
I was just gonna say, like, the one or two people he needs to get on the thing, he's like, get the fuck on the plane right now.
Do we recommend this movie?
I do not recommend watching this movie.
I recommend watching this movie if you want to have a wet, wild ride.
There are wetter and wilder rides, Sari.
I would recommend this movie only if you have no idea what it is and you have 3 hours to throw away. But yeah, I would recommend you have no idea what it is for the first watch through. It's almost like a little bit of a rite of passage, even if just to make you appreciate other movies more.
It's like a rite of passage in the way that like high school has a hazing, though. I think it's totally unnecessary. Nobody's any better for it.
Like getting locked in your locker.
I do recommend this movie. I think it was good. I think like there was a lot of I think the cinematography was awesome. I think the coloring was really cool, especially when he was on the oil tanker and he's trying to escape. Pyrotechnics were cool. Like I think it was a good movie. Was it going to change your life? Probably not, but yeah. I recommend it for sure. If you haven't seen it, it's worth seeing.
Now for our ratings.
All right, so I'm going to give this movie 3 cigarettes out of a possible king pack.
I'm going to give this 5 wet socks out of 10 500-year-old ski boots.
I give this movie 7.5 out of a possible 10 piss cocktails.
I don't even know if that's good.
Yeah, it's hard to discern what exactly the recommendation is, but I'm cool with just leaving that in the way it is. It's like the higher the number goes, the worse it gets. I don't know. I give this movie 4 out of a possible 10 webbed toes.
Hey, Norm, want to go back to my jokey for you?
I don't want this.
What did the ocean say to the shore? Nothing. It just waved.
I fucking see what you did there.
I'm sure you did.
Water, way to go.
I'll see myself out.
Thank you for joining us today for another episode of I'll See Myself Out.
Tell us what you thought of the movie. Please comment on any platforms you have. If you don't have a platform with comments, find one that does. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts and opinions.
If you enjoyed the podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe to I'll See Myself Out on your favorite streaming service for more upcoming content.
Join us next episode as we discuss the first season of Barry starring Bill Hader.